PulseOne's Tech Talk Live. My name is Eric Anzalone. I'm a client success manager here at PulseOne, and this is part one of our six-part IT security series that we created to help executives in small and mid-sized businesses make sense of all this crazy, ever-evolving cybersecurity landscape and help them to reduce the risk of security breaches for their organization. So following each discussion, we will do a brief question and answer forum. So during the talk, if something strikes you, put it in the chat and we'll do our best to answer as many of the questions as we can as time permits. And so without further ado, I'd like to bring in Chad Wiggins, partner and co-founder. Here, I'm going to bring him in. Partner and co-founder of PulseOne. And today's guest panelist, JT Fanning. He is a cybersecurity expert, and according to his LinkedIn page, a international celebrity alter ego. He works for SonicWALL. Let's bring him in. Where are you? There you are.
All right. Introduction.
Yeah, sure thing. All right, gentlemen, take it away. Let me just bow out. Go for it.
All right, thanks, Eric. Thanks for the introduction. And JT, yeah, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah. So everyone, we are going to be talking about the topic of what are the greatest threats to small and medium-sized businesses and how to avoid them. But to back up and paint the picture a little bit more, we polled about 3,000 CXOs that we are connected with. So that's CEOs, COOs, CFOs, and we asked them what were the subjects that they wanted to hear the most regarding cybersecurity. And this topic came to be the highest one of the highest ones, one of the top ones that they wanted to hear about. So that made us think about reaching out to JT and SonicWALL because they have a definitely unique understanding in this space and a real deep understanding in cybersecurity. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but real quick, we do have a poll question for everyone to answer. So if Eric there's the question. So the question is, how often do you meet with your IT security person or group? And the answers are weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, or not at all, or not applicable for my role. So again, how often do you meet with your IT security person? Weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, not at all. All right, yeah, so we're getting some answers here. Monthly and not applicable, which is pretty typical. Some good and maybe not so good. So I'll share the results. Oh, yeah. And cool, good information. Thanks guys for participating. We'll just continue on. Stop sharing. Let me stop sharing. Okay. Exit out. All right. Okay, so JT, you got SonicWALL. I mean, you've been in the cybersecurity space a long time. SonicWALL has definitely been in the IT security space for a long time. Tell us a little bit more about your unique ability to speak to this topic.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, my expertise comes from working primarily with managed service providers, customers of all shapes and sizes, state, local governments. But the core of the information we're going to share today is actually from the company I work for, SonicWALL, right? So 30 years in the cybersecurity space, serving customers of all sizes, federal government, as well as state, local government. But the core of the business and the place that we truly are a leader is like the SMB mid-market, right? You're talking people with less than 400 or 500 users is an area we excel heavily in. And part of that is learning to understand what threats hit those networks often and what kind of spawns bad outcomes for those customers, and then how to protect them ultimately. So that's where that information is coming from. We have a little over a million sensors worldwide, and many of those are collectors that are designed to look like small businesses and kind of be like almost a honeypot, if you're familiar with that concept, for bad stuff. We take that information and create real-time protections for customers. So the data that we're going to share today is some findings from that, as well as just some industry information.
At 1.1 million endpoints, that's unique. You don't see that too often in this space. So yeah. So what are you guys seeing? What are the trends you're seeing in the SMB market? Yeah, what are you guys seeing?
Yeah, I mean, the big one, the big stuff that kind of stands out is cost, right? Whenever I talk to customers, really when you think about cyber attacks or that, it's the risk to the business. And so I think you and I are talking before this, average cost of a cyber attack for small, medium businesses, like nationwide, is around $50,000 per incident. And I think you had some information, maybe even.
Yeah, we're seeing way north of that. Like the average cost that we're seeing is about 150 to 250,000, and that's like really all in, right? Like business outage for 2 weeks to a month, nuke and pave all the technology, every aspect has to be rebuilt, ERP systems, shipping, fulfillment centers, everything. And so really when the costs are calculated and doing the incident response and having the forensics come in, all that, when you put all that together, it's you're going to be paying probably 150 to 250,000 in the long term, 6 months, over a year, if you get breached. Yeah.
And so I think like at the end of the day, what are we trying to help small businesses avoid? It's that, right? That huge outlay of cash, capital, damage to reputation, for if that's important to the business, which most businesses have some sort of reputation they'd like to uphold. And then the other piece is cyber insurance companies, right? Insurance companies broadly have become much more strict around what they'll cover, how they'll respond to breaches. And so a lot of customers were leveraging insurance to avoid, the cost of potentially upgrading security, just thinking like, oh, I've got insurance as a backstop to cover that $150,000, $200,000 expense that could happen. And so we've seen insurance companies be very strict or straight up denying responses and claims against that. And then that mostly comes in the form of ransomware and theft of data, right? So those are big news items. I'm sure many of the people on the live stream right now or watching this later will know, like, ransomware is everywhere in the news. It affects big companies and small. And that's the area we're seeing the most impact to. And then, we talk just generally about like why, right? A lot of times I'm talking to small businesses and they're like, well, I'm not a target, or I don't have, I don't have resources that people care about. And that at some level might be true, but I heard a good breakdown from people, which is you're not the target, you're the product, right? A lot of these organizations have connections to larger companies, right? Many people, you might be a construction company that works with Amazon to do, office build outs. And so they're looking for ways to get into large organizations through small people. And they also are funding their criminal enterprise. And when I say they, I'm talking about like threat actors, malicious people. And they do that kind of just everywhere all at once. They don't really care what you have. They hope that they hit something that is valuable for you. And if it is, they know that there will be some sort of payment or demand for that resource. So,
yeah. Tell me a little bit more. You were telling me earlier about like the Department of Vital Records breach in 2021 and 400,000 military, the IRS breach, the Facebook, Equifax, and painting the picture of like not if it's going to happen, but when. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think those ones are newsworthy, right? When it's 500,000 email addresses that are all people who submitted their taxes to the IRS or something, like that's a big ticket news item that takes people forward. The parts that are crazy about that is I know that there's probably nobody on this call that reuses passwords and email addresses other places, but one, you've got a treasure trove of information that is being breached. Equifax, Target, I mean, these things have been going around forever. Federal governments, they can use that to infiltrate your network if you haven't updated your systems and processes. But two, a lot of those breaches take place because of compromised third parties, right? Contractor that works with them, or some sort of provider that does HVAC services. And so you think about the risk to large companies and small is that. And on top of all of that, it's a proliferation of attacks, right? Again, they spread these attacks very broadly in the attempt to just catch a lot of fish, like cast a wide net, to use an analogy. and just see what
Right.
we can do then. And so it's about leveling yourself up and making yourself not, the easiest targets. I realized that, if a customer could be 100% secure, but it costs $1 million, or 0% secure and it costs zero, most businesses can't live over here, but they can get over, to that side where the cost isn't as much, but the risk to the organization is lower. And so I think when a business executives are thinking about IT spend and specifically security spend, it should be about risk reduction and how do I make myself less vulnerable?
Right. And just the idea that your information is most likely on the dark web, right? With these large.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Almost certainly. Like
Yeah.
my information as well, right? And your information, like there's some piece of my digital persona is living there. Now, how much of it or how risky it is, I mean, that's probably debatable. Right. It's there.
Well, and the reason why we're talking about is, okay, we paint the picture of, why a breach could happen because your information is out there. All the bad guys, technology, it's all automated. They don't care who gets breached. It's just going on the internet 24/7. And so we laid out the problem. So let's get into how to mitigate that. What are some best practices? I know we're going to go over 7 best practices that SonicWALL has created, that it's part of PulseOne's best practices, and then some areas where you guys on this call can take and, the top 3 things that you should implement today if you don't have them, right? So let's get into that. What are you seeing? What is SonicWALL seeing as these best practices?
I think the first 3 things out the gate, the sound bite, the stuff that if you're not doing this today, or you're one of those people that's either interfacing with your IT security group monthly or quarterly or something, the first questions that you should ask, and the things that are most prevalent is, do we do multi-factor authentication today, right? So a big vector for breaches is account compromise. We talked about all those email addresses living out there in the world. Assume that they know your email address for your organization. That sometimes, based on design, those email addresses are interchangeable for lots of different systems. And reality is people use some of the same passwords, maybe not always, but research shows that people use the same passwords. So right. When you're thinking about how can I fix that, the first and minimum gate is multi-factor authentication. And so many of you might be familiar with that. I would use it on my personal accounts as well as my professional or business related accounts. If you don't have that set up for Instagram, for example, and you don't have that set up for your business login VPN connection, it's a necessity, because the reality is chances are your credentials will get harvested if they aren't already and used to try to access your accounts. And if they get access to those accounts and you have privileges on a device, they can do really malicious things like deploy ransomware and all that other stuff. So multi-factor authentication, maybe look at using a password manager, right? And then the kind of definite need is what do I do if that happens, right? If your 2-factor authentication gets breached and someone does have access to your compromised account and you get an alert from Gmail or from Microsoft that says unknown login detected in Bangalore, what are you going to do? What steps would you normally take, right? I'm going to change my password. Maybe I'm going to go change passwords of other critical sites. So I think a playbook would be the last piece. Multi-factor authentication, a password manager, and a playbook.
Awesome. MFA, password manager, and a playbook, incident response. Perfect. Okay, so now what are these top 7 security technologies that you guys are recommending?
Yeah, I think from a broad perspective, as you answer those couple quick questions with your team, the way you want to approach it from a business, and I would say probably the 7 bare minimum areas that security is expected today, starts with endpoint security, right? How do you secure desktops, laptops, other connected devices, maybe tablets or phones, when they have company information on them? And so oftentimes that's an antivirus, a managed antivirus that someone is monitoring and using in the network, but starts there. Certainly you move into how do people securely access data remotely? With everyone working from home and a big push for remote work, When a person outside of your network connects to it, how is that connection secured? So that's the second category: endpoint security, remote access security. The other piece that comes up is, how do you secure stuff that's on premise or that you manage in a cloud? So that's typically called network security. Could also be called like local security, right? So typically that's a firewall. That's what our company primarily represents and provides as a firewall. But there's a couple different variants of that. And so you want to ask, what are we doing to protect stuff that's behind our internet connection? The next step is cloud security. Probably everyone on this call, and if not, majority of them are using something like Office 365 to do mail. They might also share files in like OneDrive or Google Drive, those kind of platforms. And we're seeing more and more malicious documents being loaded into those environments, either intentionally or accidentally, and then that becoming a vector for spreading of ransomware and other malicious activity through your network. So certainly, how do I address my email security when it's in the cloud? A lot of business owners I talk to, even in relatively large companies, assume that the like Microsofts of the world just by default provide that security. And the unfortunate reality is they don't, right? So definitely want to have a conversation about, what are we doing for this, right? Cool, we enabled multi-factor authentication, but like, if someone sends a malicious file in our email to me, is there a tool? Do we have a solution? Do we have a process that shuts that down or monitors that? And what we've been seeing recently is a lot of customers just aren't aware of that as an attack vector. So that'd be a big one. And that kind of couples with email security. I blend it together, but email security and then how do you protect your cloud applications are certainly two big pieces there.
Yeah, and we're seeing exactly what you said, the cloud security, the misunderstanding that everyone has, or most people have, that, oh, it's in the cloud, it's one, it's backed up, and two, it's secure. And nobody reads the fine print when they click the license agreement, that you're on your own basically if it gets breached and that data isn't backed up, your cloud's not backed up, and people that are bad guys are getting in there. So yeah, that cloud app security is becoming more and more of a big deal. And the email security, still the number one attack vector is through email, phishing and spear phishing attacks. That's how they're getting in. And one of the statistics is, it's over 70% of all attacks come from employees.
Yep.
And that's all through email phishing and spear phishing attacks. And employees aren't doing maliciously. Oh, there's some that do.
Most aren't. Most
of them, yeah, it's all accidental. It's all, didn't going too fast. We all have too much to do, and we're just going too fast, and we think we're communicating with the person that it says on our screen, but it's not. And then lo and behold, that's how the attacks are happening. So that
we talked about, Chad, I mean, you were saying like, not only do you need tools because they make mistakes sometimes, but you need to reduce the number of mistakes they made. And I think you guys talked about a way you do some education for end users.
Right.
That's critical. And the reason I got on this webinar and the reason you guys put this together is because we're trying to educate business executives to like understand the risk, but customers and employees need to know too. So I don't know if you maybe just do a little, segment.
Yeah. So PulseOne, we have technology that helps do training. So phishing and spear phishing and computer training, protecting people and educating people on what to look for, what to see, how to detect it, because they are the last way to protect themselves. You can have these 7 layers of security, but if you accidentally click on a link, you can really infect your local network, cloud networks, all of it. And so that last piece of educating your staff, educating yourself, educating your employees is huge. And we're showing that companies that some companies will have a standard that they do training once a year, but that is almost, it's showing that that's not even good enough. It's like almost like you're not training people at all if you're just doing an annual training. Companies that are doing monthly training with simulation attacks inside their employees and inside their network, they're going from like over 70% chance of getting breached down to less than 5% chance just by the training alone. So yeah, that's so PulseOne, we have that technology that does the simulation attacks and the 15-20 minute training that employees can do monthly. It's helping us because we don't want our clients to be breached and deal with that, and obviously it's helping the client. So but it is definitely this layered approach. There is not, I probably should have started out with this earlier, there is no silver bullet, right?
No, I wish there was. It'd be easy to sell and everyone would buy it,
Exactly. There is no silver bullet. So, but this layered approach with the educating, the training is definitely reducing the percentage of you being attacked. And it's what we're trying to do is get everyone from not being the low-hanging fruit on the tree, not being so easily able to be breached. You actually have a front door on your house with a lock on it. There's so many small, medium-sized businesses that are just completely wide open. So what we're seeing is if the bad guys come to do a breach and you have these minimum requirements, you have this 7-layer, you have the training going on, they go right by you. It's too much work to get into your network because they can just go right next door to the business that doesn't have a front door or a lock or anything and get right in and do what they need to do. So
I think like that conversation from the beginning where people are like, well, I don't have anything of value to steal, or like, I'm not a big target or something. That only holds true if you aren't a super easy target, right? So like you're saying,
right,
step up a little bit, you're midway difficulty. Now, unless you've really got like resources that someone wants to, they're going to move on to the easier targets and just farm of those ones that are spot on.
Right. So move on a little bit more. We have some questions that you guys can take back to your MSP, your in-house IT, or your IT security company. And we have these 6 questions that you can ask that would be good to ask yourselves. So one is, do you have these 7-layer security technology? And then 2, do you have a patch management process solution? Do you have endpoint detection and response solution? Do you have employee security awareness training? Do you have a backup solution with 2 copies on site and 1 copy off site? Do you perform test restores for your backup solution? And like what JT was talking about, do you have an incident response plan? So we've said a lot. Everyone can connect to us after the webinar and we can give you more information so that way you guys can start working on this yourself. So I think anything else, JT, that you dying to share?
No, I mean, I think the 7 layers, you've got those listed out. If you haven't, roll back and remember what those are that you can talk to them about. You mentioned endpoint detection response solution, just so everyone on the call knows what that is. That's someone managing and monitoring all the alerts that come from endpoints. What we've seen heavily is people invest into solutions. They spend $10, $15, $20, $25,000 on products, and they assume that will protect them without the ability for someone to manage it on the back part. And like one of the big reasons that SonicWALL partners with you all, Chad, is because it's not enough for just like 1 or 2 or 3 people to manage the volume of that. You really do need to understand what to look for, how to react to it. And so when Chad mentioned endpoint detection response, that's a process as well as sometimes a product, but really that's understanding of the volume of logs and stuff that come to your network. And I would double click on that with your security teams, because oftentimes that's an area where people are overwhelmed, but they're scared, or maybe that depending on the culture of the company, it may not be something they're comfortable saying, like, I don't really look at, right? Because sometimes there's risk to their job, or they feel like there's an implied risk to their job. So really just try to double click into how are we doing X, right? Yeah, do we have endpoint detection response? Yep. Okay, can you give me a little bit of information about how we do it? And if they say, we've got a process and here's how we roll through it, and this is the procedure, great, if you feel comfortable with it. If they don't, just say, hey, I'd like to bring in someone to just consult with us on maybe if there's a better way for us to do it. And oftentimes those are inexpensive add-ons that make huge differences for businesses. So I just, don't just say, yes, 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 we have all those things and take someone's word for it. Because oftentimes it needs like one layer pulled back would be my suggestion.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So we're going to transition into our Q&A time. And
Eric's back. Hi, Eric.
How you doing? I feel like the Brady Bunch. You guys are up there. Here's the story. Nice. Yeah. So we do have a couple questions. The first one, it was on actually the slide that you shared. Can you define ATP and RTDMI?
Sure. Those are SonicWALL technologies, and they are kind of what differentiates us as a security provider. So I mentioned we've been around for 30 years. We collect this data. ATP and RTDMI are two acronym-based technologies, but they essentially take unknown files. Let's call it like a PDF document that someone sends you. Oftentimes those are embedded with ransomware, for example, or the ability to deploy ransomware, but they look like a normal PDF. They might say, hey, take a look at this business document, and it looks legitimate to you as a human, but it's got some embedded code. So ATP unpackages that and puts it in like a safe environment and sees what it does. And if it is ransomware or something malicious, it actually prevents that file from being delivered to you or your employees. So it's a technology that is somewhat unique to SonicWALL that allows us to scrape that out. And so when we're protecting our customers and when we're working with you all, that's how we secure your network, at least one big piece of it.
And RTDMI, that would be?
It stands for real-time deep memory inspection. It's a mouthful for sure. Think of it as like the most sophisticated way you've seen. Anybody gone to the airport and there's like that big tube that you stand in and it spins around and like blast you with radiation or whatever it does? That's like the RTDMI of airport security, right? It's a tool within our toolbox that enables us to do very deep scans of those malicious codes.
Right. Here's thank you for that. And here's another question. And you kind of alluded to the cost of, cybersecurity, but we have small businesses like mine don't have money to pay for expensive cybersecurity, and we don't have the exposure that the big guys have. Should we be worried? And what would be the most important layer? Like, would it be email? If you can only afford one thing as a small business, where should you start? A firewall, email? What do you think?
Well, we sell firewall, so I'd say firewall. No,
yeah, they do. Awesome firewalls. They are our standard firewall. SonicWALL is a partner.
No, but if you're
transparency,
that's a good question. The answer is, and this is my honest opinion, it varies, and it's a horrible answer, but it depends on what you have. I would spend my money if I was running a business. I'd spend my money consulting with a group like PulseOne. Hey, please come in and help me understand what I even have, right? Because maybe you don't need a firewall. Maybe everything's in the cloud and you have no on-premise risk. You might need endpoint security. Alternatively, maybe everyone remotely connects to your stuff and you need to make sure that's locked down for compliance reasons or PCI compliance. It's very different based on the small business. So to say what's the most important thing is hard. My first dollar spent would be getting someone who's an expert and getting them to help me understand what I have, right? I mean, it'd be like if someone said, hey, what's the number one thing I can do to avoid paying taxes for my small business? Probably talk to a CPA. That's probably where I'd start, I don't know.
Sure, the most obvious. Well, and we're about to wrap this up here, but something just struck me. We're talking about cybersecurity and getting hacked, but hackers will also do it the old-fashioned way, dumpster diving, don't they? I mean, you got to be careful what you're actually throwing out. Or I heard of a case where someone left a USB drive laying, a hacker leaves them laying around. People are like, oh, cool, I could use this, plug it in, boom, you're hacked. So it's not even necessarily, it's the old fashioned way, right? I mean,
sure. I mean, again, it just depends on, there's a million risk, and to absorb that risk and understand that risk, it starts with consulting, right? Hey, we've got a bunch of employees that all show up at the same time. They go to the airport, they travel. They're like super likely to plug a USB stick into our computers. Like, well, we probably should think about how to address that. So yeah, you're spot on though. I mean,
right.
there's
I think
harvesting and everything. Go ahead, Ted.
Well, just another misunderstanding we touched on it earlier is, oh, we're too small. They're not not going to get me. And the bad guys aren't, unless you're enterprise, they're targeting you, but the bad guys aren't targeting anybody anymore. It's all automated. It's all crawlers on the internet just looking for open access to IP addresses. And I mean, there's individuals, home computers are getting ransomed, and you're gonna have to pay $2,000 to get all your kids' pictures back. So it's very automated, and yeah, don't think that, oh, I'm too small. They don't want to breach me.
Yeah, I heard someone say that you are the end product. You're the resources. You're the corn or the wheat that they are harvesting when you're the low hanging fruit customer. They don't care that it's, ABC company. They just care that they can get something from you, even if it's small.
We have one last question. This one kind of came in a little late. When I purchased computers for my company, I was talked into purchasing Windows Defender over Norton, but I'm concerned that neither is sufficient. Am I correct? And what should I do to fix it?
Well, you are partially correct, but there's a big difference between managed and unmanaged. So Windows Defender and Norton, they're most likely, Windows Defender is not a managed solution, and Norton, there are some managed solutions, and most of them are not. And so you want a managed solution from a company like PulseOne, where you have a tech company monitoring all the alerts. It's not, if you don't have a managed solution, if a computer gets attacked, you don't know that it is unless the employee tells you or you've seen it, and you have to individually check each computer. So you need to go from an unmanaged solution to a managed solution.
Right. And
looks like there was an add-on to it that says, I do have managed support, but concerns about them too. Should I have added that? I think that you're like kind of in the primary case, which is start with the little consulting, understand what you actually have, right? Because there's a lot of like consumer-based products as well as like enterprise-based products and a whole bunch in between. So, quick consult with Chad and the team there, Eric, and hey, what do I actually have? What is the solution I have? And is it sufficient for my business? And they're really the experts to help you navigate those waters. But certainly, the combination of those tools are not something I commonly see in a managed environment that would be properly done. So this is not something I'm super familiar with. Not saying that they're bad, good, or indifferent. I don't know the exact scenarios, but certainly it's something you'd want to just double click on.
Awesome. Final thoughts, gentlemen? Either of you?
No, but I'm thankful everyone joined.
Yeah, I mean, I have the one takeaway, which is if you're watching this later, this could be long-term content or you're live. I mean, a phone call to check your environment, to ask a question about how you're doing is way easier and better than a phone call to say we have ransomware and we are up, S Creek and we don't know what to do. Like, you being proactive in this, and the companies I've seen be proactive in this, use it as a competitive differentiator for their business, right? They become more efficient. They are more likely to succeed. They can do contracts with bigger companies. They just tend to do better. The people that neglect it, they suffer for it, right? Operationally, risk-wise, long-term reputation. So it is something that benefits to be proactive. And I always say the takeaway is just an email to the team at PulseOne says, hey, I just want to talk to you about what I got. Not really interested in anything right now, but I want to just go through it. It will save your organization long-term, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Great opinion.
Well put. Certainly, we're going to end it there, but certainly if anyone has any follow-up questions, you can reach out to us at our website. Just to Before I even get to this, JT, awesome. Thank you. You are our first guest on this series, and really appreciate you breaking the ice. Awesome job. Thank you so much.
International celebrity.
We didn't even get to that, but
that's for the next time. That's for the next time.
yeah. So our IT series continues next week at noon. I will be talking with Ian Patterson, the CEO of Plurilock, and we're going to discuss the impact of ransomware on small to medium businesses and how we can go about reducing that impact. For now, thank you so much, everyone. Come back again. See us next week. You can register at our website for the talk. And Chad and JT, once again, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Playing along at home. Have a good week. We'll talk to you next week.